Hello, and welcome back. I'd like to give you a 3-month update on my Lemur Pro lemp10 from System76. I ordered it on November 11th, it arrived on December 11th, and today is March 12th, so we're right at 3 months. So I'll be able to give you a better feel for how I feel about the hardware. I'm not going to talk very much about the software, in part because if you want to know more about the software, you could easily install it yourself on one of your own PCs or a virtual computer. So mainly I want to get you guys my impressions on the hardware, since that is what's harder to get your hands on and harder to get a good impartial review on. So in continuing with my previous themes, I'm going to point out this ridiculously short power cord. The brick is very compact and small. I like that, but otherwise, this is basically useless. So I hopped onto that Jungle website, and I found myself a $20 power supply. I think it was on sale for $17 at the time. TKDY. I'll see if I can't put a link down below. Don't expect it to be there. Don't expect it to be $20, but maybe it's something you could find. If you're interested, I've been using this since I got it. It works fine. It's not as small and compact, but let me tell you what, having 3 feet of cable on either end, it's just so much nicer. Now, my wife was having problems with her Apple. The battery's dead on it, and so that got me looking at it, and I realized her MacBook Pro uses a USB-C charger. So this can use one too. So I was able to use the USB Type-C charger that came with her 2017 MacBook Pro, and it works. This is I think it's a 61 watt charger, and look at the miles and miles of cord. And what I really like about this version of it is for $18 you can replace the USB-C part when that gets damaged. Not if, but when. So Apple finally did something fairly okay. Here's the deal. If I go onto Apple's website and I put in my information so I can get a discount, a lot of you can get discounts through your employer, or veteran and military get discounts. $62. $62 for this 61 watt charger that, it's Apple, so it's pretty good quality. System76 wants $65 for this. It's just not a very good value. What I'd like to know is, could I have bought this laptop without this power supply and saved 65 bucks? I would have done that in a heartbeat. So feel free to shop around. I mean, a white Apple power supply is probably not going to be your first choice to go with the System76, but in a pinch, it'll certainly do. So this is as good a time as any to talk about the LED that's next to the power port. Right now it's blinking green slowly, which means that the computer is asleep. If I wake it up, it becomes solid. Computer's awake. And that's all it does. If I plug in the charger and unplug it, it doesn't change. It doesn't tell you if it's charging or not. Now, if the computer is powered off, then the light will be off. But if you were to plug in your power supply, the light will go orange. Now, what I didn't think to test would be if you were charging through USB Type-C, would the LED still light up or not? I'm sorry, I don't know. So I kind of miss not having a way of knowing for sure that it's charging, but it's not really been much of an issue. And I was going to say that Gnome doesn't tell you when the battery's charging or not. And then I rebooted 3 weeks ago to see about resolving an issue that had cropped up, to see if rebooting would help. It didn't. But restarting Gnome either brought in a bunch of updates or it fixed something wasn't working. And now all of a sudden, I have battery status icons in my taskbar for full battery, partial charge, almost dead, charging. So that works okay for me. Not had any problems there. Okay, so previously I'd mentioned that I really wasn't getting very good battery life, maybe 5 or 6 hours watching 1080p videos, and that definitely remains the case. One oddity that I haven't been able to pin down exactly is when I installed KDE Plasma, I noticed that my battery life was that tells you how much time you got left for the battery's dead. Um, that and between that and the percentage of my battery, I felt like in KD Plasma I was getting really long battery life. And then when I went back to Gnome to do a comparison, I realized, wait a minute, even Gnome is getting better battery life. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just my imagination, placebo effect. But just the fact that KD Plasma is installed and I'm not even using it, it seems like I get just a little bit better battery life, like maybe an extra, 30 minutes to an hour when watching, video content. That said, it's still a little bit short. And so what I find is that for every 1 hour of battery use, there's about, 30 minutes of charging that I have to pay for later on to get that battery full again. It takes a good 2.5, 3.5 hours to completely fill the battery while plugged in. So if I start the morning with a fully charged battery, because I left it plugged in overnight, by the end of the day I'm usually looking for a wall outlet, and sometimes even in the middle of the day I'm looking for it. And if I'm looking for a wall outlet at 5 o'clock in the evening and it takes 3 hours to charge, I'm probably ending the day on the battery charger. So it's still a little disappointing, but I asked System76, I'm like, this is what I'm seeing, and they didn't seem at all surprised. So I'm sure it depends upon your use. If you're going to sit there and read a PDF file or an ebook or something, yeah, you can get 12 to 14 hours. I don't doubt it. But if you're actually doing stuff, I wish it was better, but it's adequate. Now, one of the ways to stretch out your battery life, I had mentioned before that when sleeping, it uses up about 10% of the battery over, the night while you're sleeping. I asked System76, hey, could we enable hibernation, suspend to disk, so that, after you've been sleeping for an hour or two, maybe it could go into hibernate and save some electricity. And the answer I got was basically that technically they could. The problem is that when you suspend to disk, your swap space is not encrypted, so you're basically taking all of your memory contents and putting it on an encrypted drive, or a partition on your drive. And so they would have to encrypt the swap space, and then since the swap space has to be at least as big as your memory, they'd have to have different size swap spaces for all of their different memory configurations, and so they'd have to have different install images for all of their different laptops, and the excuses were pouring out like bunnies out of a rabbit hole. I tell you what, they couldn't do it for this, that, and the other. And it never apparently occurred to them that some people may not encrypt their hard drives and therefore don't care if their swap space is encrypted. Apparently it also didn't occur to them that you could make a swap space that was 64 or 128 gigabytes and it would cover all models. A minute ago I mentioned that the battery status indicator on Gnome wasn't working for me. I had a similar problem where the backlight for the keyboard, whenever I came out of sleep, it would come on to its lowest setting. I had to turn it off. The computer would go to sleep, and when it came back out, it would turn back on. It still does that to me, but what I found is that if I log out of Gnome and log back on again, that seems to fix itself for a while. Logging out of Gnome actually fixes quite a few things. When Gnome starts getting a little squirrely, just back on out, go back in, and that gets it going. As a matter of fact, my little USB-C adapter for my headphones, or earbuds, I should say, it works pretty well, but when it stops working, log out of Gnome, log back in. Which brings me to my next point. I have turned on tap to click. I don't think you should have to push a trackpad if you don't want to. So when you log out of Gnome and you drop back to GDM, you would think tap to click would still be enabled. It's not. And I understand it's Linux, this team's doing that thing, this team's doing that thing, but talk to each other. All right? Let's make this work. Now previously I had mentioned having a problem with the solid state drive, and about once a day after coming out of sleep, the system would just lock up and give me errors. I contacted System76 and gave them the error messages, and they were pretty quick to say, hey, looks like a bad SSD. Let's ship you a new one. And they got it to me, and I swapped it out, sent them the old one, free shipping both ways, and I didn't have any problems. I ran for 3 weeks after that replacement, and I only rebooted because I was trying to sort out some problems with, I think I was looking at some issues with the video. And I just want to reboot to rule that out. That was 3 weeks ago. I've been up for 3 weeks since that reboot. So I've been really pleased with the stability, the long up times, and not having to touch this power button, which I've also not had a problem with accidentally bumping it. It's out of the way, and I'm really happy with that. Now, when the computer's sleeping like this, one of the things I realized is that to wake it up, just open the lid. You don't have to touch any buttons. It has a switch. Now, right now, I've got this on the lowest brightness setting possible. And you probably can't tell it here, but when you're in a dark room, this will sear your retinas. It is just amazingly bright. And on most computers, I run the brightness on the screen like halfway between, brightness, the highest brightness and the lowest. If the sun's shining in my eyes, I'll bring this up to about 1/4 of the brightness. It is bright. So I do wish it had a dimmer setting, and as a matter of fact, I wish you could turn it all the way off. Sometimes I find it handy to be able to turn the screen off, so if you're cleaning it or you want to look at something, you can get a good look at it. So I don't know, maybe that's something you can tweak in the firmware. Speaking of the firmware, an update came out the other day, and Gnome popped up a message and said, hey, new update. And I go in there and I'm reading the message, and it's something about clearing the NV memory when you remove the CMOS battery or something like that. And I was like, well, that doesn't sound like anything that's affecting me, so I'm not going to do it. So now I get updates all the time. Oh, hey, you've got an update available. Oh, firmware update available. Every time I log out of Gnome, log back in, or so often, it just keeps popping up. And I haven't found a way to turn it off. I'm sure somewhere hidden in a menu somewhere, there's a way to turn that off. But it would be nice if I could say, hey, skip this one, tell me about the next one. But it's really nice to be there, to be supported, in Linux. Now, I did not clean this before I came out here, so there's a few dust balls, and there's a few fingerprints here that may not show up well. It's not what I would call a fingerprint magnet, but if you got greasy fingers, it will stick. So, fellas, do the right thing. After dinner, wipe your fingers on the tablecloth before you go back to using your computer. So I'm starting to get used to the smaller 14-inch screen and the lower resolution compared to my 15-inch MacBook Pro with its Retina screen. But one of the things I noticed is that a lot of the text and the menus, where the fonts were really small, as compared to the MacBook Pro. I mean, but you go to the MacBook Pro and you think you've turned on some accessibility setting because it's just in your face. And with this thing, I find myself, leaning forward. So I went to go turn on fractional scaling, and I thought, oh, okay, 125, 150 % scaling was, felt comfortable. And it looked great at first, but then I realized that the title bar on some of the windows, the font actually shrank and got so small it was unreadable. And then I went to go watch a video, and there's just all kinds of horizontal tearing throughout the video. It was just completely unwatchable. And that's what led to me rebooting, because I thought, there's something wrong, I gotta reload. It was fractional scaling. So when they warn you that there may be some performance benefit, what they really mean is, this is useless, don't even bother. So speaking of videos, I did not know this. You fellas probably do. But if you want to watch DRM content, don't try it on Linux, because you're going to be disappointed. First of all, you've got to have one of the major browsers, and then you got to install the Wildvine plugin, and then you find out that it's not very well supported, and they'll give you a low resolution image. So, for example, when I first got this laptop, I didn't touch my MacBook Pro for like a month. And then I was like, ooh, some new videos on Amazon Prime. pull them up on the System76. And I'm just sitting there going, why is this so blurry? It's like it was like a high compression. You know, if things weren't moving, they were crystal sharp, but all the motion was grainy and blurry and blocky. And I thought, well, this can't be right. I go to YouTube, okay, it looks fine there. Go to Netflix, well, that's about DVD quality. Something's not right. Come to find out, it's the DRM. And if you're watching an older film, sometimes they'll be like, you know, you're not going to be ripping us off. Go ahead and have full quality. But if you're trying to watch anything modern, it seems like, you know, you're hurting. You know, like Betamax, DVD, that kind of thing. So I started bringing out the MacBook Pro, despite its many faults and problems. So I'm surprised people don't talk about this. You know, I realized that, you know, ooh, closed source, DRM, Big Brother, blah, blah, blah. But so much of this computer is full of closed source hardware anyway. I think you're being a bit hypocritical to draw a line in the sand artificially and say, oh, no, I can't do that. So I hope the Linux community, System76, could do something a little bit more to make DRM a possibility for those who might want to use it. Now, speaking of the hardware in the Lemur Pro, one thing I didn't mention earlier, but I was aware of, is that with these new 11th generation Intel CPUs, they have turned the IME back on. Now, some of you are probably running for the hills, wrapping your heads with tinfoil, but apparently, in order to get the sleep states to work, they had to turn the IME back on. And I don't know how much of it they were able to disable versus enable, whether it's the whole enchilada or what. I had heard some rumor that maybe they would give you an update later on that would have IME disabled, but with the disadvantage of you really wouldn't get any sleep states with it. I was aware of that when I bought it. They were very forthright, and it's not really something I can blame System76 for. They're just trying to do the best with the that Intel's putting out these days. Now, one of the things I've really been pleased with is because of the lightweight and I suppose the smaller size compared to what I'm used to, this laptop is really easy to carry around and take with you, and I've really become spoiled by the lightweight. It's really been good. Also, as you might gather, I do a fair amount of watching videos, you know, YouTube or whatever. You know, as you can see the mess behind me, I've constantly got projects going on, and you know, YouTube's kind of become the place to go to figure out how to do your plumbing and your electrical and your trim work and your sheetrock and your insulation and your painting and your mudding and so on and so forth. And I'm happy to say that most of the time I could watch a full screen 1080p video and the fans don't turn on. Sometimes there's a background process that'll kick on for something and it'll add just enough heat that the fans will kick on slow speed for a little while. Or maybe a charge in the battery and that creates a little bit of excess heat and that kicks on the fan. It'll run on slow speed for a little while and turn off. And you know, if I'm listening to a video, I don't even really notice it. It's very unobtrusive. And so I've been really pleased with how little the fans run and how quiet it is. I think that's really important, is if you're not really using the computer very much, it should stay quiet. So, what do I think? It's been 3 months, so, you know, tell us, should we buy it or not? And I think it's a pretty good solid buy. You know, there's a little bit of a premium on the price because of the format. It is an ultra portable. My take on it is that it is a very good workstation, a very portable, mobile workstation. It's not going to be great for consuming media because you've got a smaller screen, horrendous speakers, you know, the DRM issue. But if you're going to use it as a workstation, especially in a Linux-based environment, which is what I have on my network, it's really good at that. The hardware is great. Power cord, of course, I've covered that enough times. We don't need to go into that anymore. The software is pretty good. I hope that System76 and Gnome will kind of smooth that up a little bit, take care of some of the rough edges. But if you're looking for a workstation, this is a pretty solid choice. If you want to be consuming media content, you probably want to look at something like an Apple. So overall, I'm very pleased with the hardware. If it sounds like the kind of computer that you would need, I wouldn't hesitate to buy. I don't expect to be making another review unless something strange happens or I accumulate a bunch of additional information I want to share. So hopefully these 3 videos have been helpful to you, and please feel free to share your own videos so that everyone can benefit. Thanks for watching.